the program at a later time and on our AARP YouTube channel. So please click Got It when it appears on your screen. You should have seen that little message. And if you're not familiar, AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people to choose how they live as they age. With nearly 38 million members and offices in every state, plus Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and social connection. Today's program focuses on financial security, which is part of our social change agenda. Who's in the audience today? If you haven't already, please put your first name and what city you're zooming in from. Jacqueline, who do you see in the chat?
Oh, we have some of people from everywhere today. We have Ellen from Washington, Pennsylvania. We have Janice from Atlanta. We have Margarita from Long Beach. We have Jeff from Los Angeles. We have Fran from Simi Valley, Terry from Sacramento, Mike from San Jose, Kathy from Houston. We've got people from all across the country joining us today on this good topic.
That's great. Thanks so much, Jacqueline, and thank you all for coming and sharing in the chat. Now let's take a quick moment to answer today's trivia question. Put your answer in the chat. Which of the following were used as currency? Cattle, cowrie shells, leather deerskin, or all of the above? Hey, Jacqueline, what are you seeing as some of the answers in the chat?
I see all of the above, and I see several, everybody says all of the above pretty much. I don't see anything about cowrie shells at this point. Oh, I see a leather deerskin. I see, yeah, pretty much all of the above or leather deerskin. Not even cattle. What's the answer, Vince?
Well, maybe we made it too easy because the correct answer is all of the above. While for the most part, these are no longer used as forms of currency, cattle, sheep, and goats were all used as forms of payment. Cowrie shells, sometimes strung together, have been a form of currency for many years and widespread in Asia and Africa. And leather sheets made of deerskin have often been credited as being the first type of banknote. Now, I'm sure glad I don't have to bring my goat to the department store to buy clothes anymore. So anyway, thanks everyone for participating in the trivia question. Today's session, The Money Saver, is the third of our four-part series, Piggy Bank Essentials with Martin. Each quarter, he will be focusing on a different aspect of money management. So to get warmed up today, we have 3 poll questions, and I ask you to quickly submit your answers. So here's poll number 1. In the current economy, how are you doing with saving money? A, I'm saving at the same rate as before inflation. B, I had to lower my saving amount. C, I am not saving at the moment. So I'll give you a few minutes or a few seconds to answer this question. Looks like the answers are rolling in. All right, it looks like a lot of you are saving at the same rate as before inflation, but seems like some of you have also had to lower your saving amount or you're not being able to save right now. All right, we'll roll to question number 2. Question number 2. When it comes to daily shopping, which are the following are true about you? A, I consistently look for ways to save. B, I'll take a deal if it's easy to find. Or C, I usually just shop regardless of a deal or not. Answers are rolling in, and it looks like a lot of you are looking for ways to save. So that's a great situation for today's topic, which is the money saver. So hopefully you get lots of tips on how to save money. And we have one more poll for you. Saving money is a strong money habit of mine. True or false? And it looks like a lot of you have the habit of saving money. That's great. But for those of you who don't, hopefully Martin can teach us all some tricks. All righty. So it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Martin Booker. Martin Booker is a program manager at AARP, where he leads various financial education initiatives about investing, Social Security, and budgeting. After receiving a master's degree in social work at the University of Connecticut, Martin worked in the nonprofit sector in Washington, D.C., and developed a passion for helping people improve their money habits. He completed the Certified Financial Planner program at Georgetown University and began to teach others about money in a practical and actionable way. Today, Martin offers individual and group coaching services, classes, and leads workshops about credit, investing, retirement planning, and other finance-related topics. His goal is to engage and educate people to better understand how to not just make money, but keep their money. And per our tradition, here are some fun facts about money. Did you know it costs roughly 2.4 cents to make a penny? So America does not save money making pennies. 5% of the people who buy lottery tickets account for 51% of lottery tickets sold. And there is more monopoly money printed every year than actual cash. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Vince. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for joining. I'm glad to be back with you, and I see some familiar faces, so I'm excited to be here. Always get great energy coming on and doing these events, so this is gonna be a good one. And I see we have, just looking at the poll questions, it looked like we have a lot of savers in the room, so we are in good company. We have a lot of folks who came on and who's already familiar with this and who's already doing what we're going to teach. So here's one thing that I want to make sure that we do today. Within the chat, while we're having this conversation, of course, put your questions in the chat. If you have questions about anything that you want to know, we want to hear it. We want to know what you, we want to answer all the questions that we can. We're going to have some time for Q&A a little later. So we'll get to that and try to answer as many of your questions as we can. But one of the things that I love to do with a topic like savings is I like to crowdsource, because if there's one thing that I know, that there's a lot of people that's on this call today who has some phenomenal tips and have some great hacks and tricks that you use to save money or to just cut some costs. So we want to make sure we hear from you. So when we go through the topics, as we go through each topic in the chat, give us some of your tips, because we're gonna all help each other throughout this conversation. I saw that we have some savers in the room, so I definitely want to hear from you. I want to make sure that you're teaching us what you're doing to save money as well. So at this point, I'm going to share my screen so that we can get started with this great conversation around savings. And well, so today, as I mentioned, we're talking about the saver. So we've had this conversation now. This is our third time, and we've talked through a few different money habits that we have. So today's the saver, and I'm going to make sure that we know about that. But before we get into that, I just want to give this quick disclaimer. As you know, we're sharing this information. It's all information for informational purposes only. This is not direct advice, financial advice. Of course, if you want to get direct financial advice, you want to make sure that you're talking to a financial professional who's looking at your specific situation. And that's important, because personal finance is very personal. We want to make sure that we're talking to someone who understands our story, who understands all the things that they need to know about you specifically, and have looked at your numbers before you get direct financial advice. So I'm going to share a lot of great tips. Hopefully they're practical, and I want everyone to get at least one thing that you can take away today. But it's all for informational purposes. Now, with that in mind, so here's what we're going to talk about today. So as I mentioned, we're talking about the saver and saving money. So these are some of the things we're going to talk about. So what is start with talking about the saver's characteristics. What do we want to know about people who naturally save and who are really good at saving? I'm going to start off talking about that. Then I'm going to make sure that I tell you about some of the great daily ways to save in general. We know inflation has been up, so we want to make sure that we know some daily ways to save our money and to prepare to save if we need them, so that we can keep that budget intact. We know if expenses are going up and our income's not going up with it, then we got to find some ways to reel it back in and save some money. So I'm gonna go through that. Then I want to talk a little bit about emergency savings. That's an important part of savings, and also long-term savings. For we want to make sure that we're all thinking about those. The ways that we save for the long haul, and that we have enough money while we're in retirement. And while we're in retirement. Then, as we know, we're getting close to the holidays. We're heading right into Q4. So let's talk about some of those holiday savings tips and some of the things that we need to know about savings for the holidays. And lastly, because we're talking about the saver, I'm going to tell you all the great things about the saver. I'm going to end with some of the things that the saver can do to make sure that they're taking advantage of being a well-rounded financial manager. So I'm going to close with that. And of course, we're going to do some Q&A. But feel free to fill the chat up with your questions if you have them, so that we can have them and answer them during Q&A. All right. So as I mentioned, there's these 4 money characteristics. We talked about this in January. There's the money maker, the saver, you can make money, save money, grow money, and then you can give and spend money. So earlier this year, we talked about making and what we can do to make money. We've also in Q2, we talked about growing money and the things that we want to do to invest and grow the income that we currently have. Today, we're going to talk about saving. And then lastly, in Q4, make sure that you come out in November, because we're going to have a conversation about giving and spending. We'll be right around that holiday season, and that's when a lot of us decide to do a lot of giving. We tend to spend, so we want to make sure that we're doing it in a great way. So today, let's talk about savings and saving money, and this is a great time because we are headed into holiday season. So when we think about the characteristics of the saver, let's start there. So some of the things that you'll hear about someone that saves money, and if you're the saver, I want to make sure, if you hear one of your characteristics, feel free to just put your hand up, or just put in the chat. Just put me in the chat if I'm talking to you. And also, if you're a saver and you don't see one of your characteristics on here, please add it to the list, because we want to hear from you. What are some of the things that you know about yourself as a saver that tends to be a strong characteristic of yours? So when we talk about the saver, one of the things you'll tend to hear is that they're frugal, right? They're holding on to their money. They're gonna save their money, and they're not spending typically every dollar that they have. And then you're also going to hear that they tend to save first. So naturally, they're the saver is going to be someone who's always, they receive their paycheck or they receive any income that's coming in, and the first priority is to put some in savings. They're going to make sure that they save. Then you'll see when we think about someone who's saving money, they're consistently finding deals. They're looking for deals. I saw it on the poll question. We had some folks who said that they're usually looking for the deal first, So that's something that you're going to always see typically from a saver. They're looking for that deal. They're going to go looking online for a coupon. They're going to find some way, or they'll buy it secondhand because they know that they may be able to get it cheap, and they can get it still in good condition. They aim for affordability. So when we think about someone who's naturally saving, you tend to you want to be comfortable knowing that wherever you are, whatever you're driving, wherever you live, you can afford it, and you can afford it comfortably. So you're going to typically not go to the top dollar when it comes to spending. If you were approved for a loan for $300,000 for a house, you're not spending close to $300,000, right? You're gonna aim more around maybe $215, because you want to make sure that there's some room for you to continue to save and comfortably live. And then lastly, they're going to control their spending. So that saver, that's someone who's they're monitoring their spending, they're watching what they spend, and they tend to not spend up to every dollar of their income. So are you hearing? Are we definitely saying? I see some folks in the chat. Oh, DIY, yeah, that's a good one. So I see some stuff coming in the chat about people who are constantly saving and who's naturally a saver. So these sounds like some of these things are accurate, and it sounds like there's even more that you all have that you're doing in the chat. So yep, keep those coming. If you got more that you typically do, add that in there. And I'm saying, yep, I see. So some people are saying that's definitely them. we're speaking your language and coming down your aisle. So those are some of those characteristics. So when you think about things, if you aim to be more of a saver, then I want you to think about, some of these things. Where are some of these places where you can maybe take on some of these traits so that you can save more, and so that you can find places to save in addition to what you're already doing. So keep these characteristics in mind and kind of introduce them in your life if you haven't already. And here's another great thing, because I want us to all be thinking about this. As you're seeing some of these things and you're hearing about them, take note and pass this information on. You want to make sure that if there's a niece or a younger cousin or a grandchild or a child in your life, make sure that you're telling them about some of these things, because we know that some of the helpful thing to do is to learn it and then pass it on. And we know when we start to teach others what we learn, it actually starts to stick for us a little better. So be sure to share some of this information. So now let's talk about some of the daily ways to save. As we mentioned, inflation is high. We've been seeing it. We've been feeling it. So let's talk about some of the ways that we're going to consistently save our money. So when we think about the ways that we're going to save, and I want to hear from you all with this in this one too, because this is a great place to crowdsource. When we think about all the things that we've been doing consistently to save ourselves more money, I want you to add some of these to the chat, because I know that there's always some good ways to save, and I'm already seeing some about like paying in cash instead of putting things on credit, right? So that you don't pay additional money. That's one of the good ones for savings as well. So some of the things that we may have to do when we think about our ways to save is some of these lifestyle adjustments. Some of the things that we may just have to change up just a little bit, and just temporarily until until things start to shape up a little better, right? So I want you to think about some of these as we go along. So when it comes to dining out, you may have heard me say this before. It's something that I talk about often when it comes to dining out. It's something we tend to not think about, but we know it, but we don't think about it. And that's just that simply eating out. The earlier you eat out, the cheaper it tends to be. Breakfast is cheaper than lunch, which is typically cheaper than dinner. It's a very so if we're thinking, if you're someone who you want to eat out, you want to go on a nice go on a date for a meal, then or you just you tend to just enjoy eating out in general, then the earlier that you eat out, the better, the cheaper the cost. So go for a dinner. You can go for a breakfast date and then cook lunch, cook dinner, right? Or just if you're going out for even a celebration, you can also do breakfast instead of lunch or dinner if you know you're going to, because that's one of the things that I found when it comes to finance is knowing yourself is one of the best things that you can possibly do. You got to be honest with yourself, right? We won't change everything tomorrow. We won't cut everything out. But in those times when we decide that, hey, this is a part of my lifestyle, is something that I'm going to do, then we have to find the ways to manage that and to just find little hacks that work for us. So, if eating out is definitely your thing, you can say, hey, I don't have to go out to the movies. I don't have to take a trip, but I am going to dine out. Then in this case, then maybe find the cheaper way to do so. And that it could be breakfast as opposed to doing dinner or lunch, so that you can enjoy yourself, but also still save some money. And I'm seeing some things roll in the chat about that as well. So these and some great crowdsourcing too. So other things, discounts, take advantage of coupons, take advantage of your AARP discount, because I know we're all members. And then when it comes to things like eating out, we may find some specials that could help us out as well. There's all types of lunch specials and things of that nature. Then also splitting meals. There are some places we go to that will provide large portions. And in that case, we may be able to split it. Or if you buy that meal with a large portion, then you know that you may have lunch for 2 days, or you may be able to have lunch and dinner as opposed to it being one meal. And that's a good way to save as well. So food, that's a good one when it comes. Those are ones when it comes to food. So some of the other ones that we want to think about is living arrangements, right? And I always say sacrifice is temporary. We only have to do it until we've met our financial goals, or in some cases, our fitness goals. Whatever it is, you make those sacrifices at a necessary time in order to save. But so when we think about some of our lifestyle adjustments, if it's living, you may be able to share housing, right? You may have a few spare bedrooms, and just renting one out or renting out a basement could cut down your expenses a bit on living arrangements, and that could be helpful. Or when we think about things like, it's called house hacking. I don't know if you've ever heard of this term, but the idea is that you'll purchase a property that has enough space to rent out so that someone else is paying a large portion of your living expenses. So I've seen some folks that'll do it. They may either buy like multi-units and they'll live in one unit and have someone else renting the other units and paying the majority of their living expenses. Or they'll have a basement, they'll live in one part, or they'll live upstairs and then rent out the basement and have like 50% of their mortgage paid by someone else. So these are things that you can do to just cut your expenses and save. Also, when it comes to grooming, we know that like hair schools, nail schools, these are great ways to get much cheaper much cheaper grooming done. So, and a lot of times you'll find just as talented hairstylists and barbers in the hair schools that you'll find outside of the hair school. So you find that shining star and you'll get your hair cut for $5 for a long time. And then you find the next one. But these are some of the things that we can do. Now, when it comes to our utility bills, I'm going to give you this one. This is something that I started doing long before I was even into money management and work at a financial professional. This was something I started doing I just wanted to save money. Out of just pure necessity. I wanted some money back. So I would call every company where I had that I tend to have some type of contract or some type of bill. And I would just simply say, hey, my bill's a little high. What can you do to lower my bill? So it works with phone companies. It works wonders with phone companies. I would call the phone company and I'd just say, hey, my bill's a little high. What could we possibly do to lower it? And they would always, it worked like a charm. They always find a way to make me, they tell me, you're a valued customer. Mr. Booker, you're a valued customer. We found a discount for you. And of course I'm a valued customer because I pay my bills every month. So, because I pay on time and I've been in business, they've gotten my business for so long, I'm a valued customer. And they always tend to lower my bill by sometimes up to $40 a month. So that could be, just some significant monthly savings just by making a phone call. And my strategy is that I would always set these things up around my birthday. So this is something that I would do. I kind of have an annual reminder. Call AT&T and I would just get my phone bill lowered and then call all the other companies and get my bills lowered. Here's one of the ways that this worked best for me. I tend to not lock into contracts. And one of my rules is to not lock into a contract with any company that's not a necessity. So if it's more of an amenity instead of a necessity, I won't lock into long-term contracts. So although they may offer me, and this may sound like the opposite of saving, but they may offer you 20% or 15% if you lock into a 2-year contract. I would never lock into those contracts because if my income was lowered, I want to make sure that I could end that service right away. So when we think about things like cable, I'll make sure that if I had to cut the cord or if I wanted to walk away, I could end it the same day as opposed to having to pay some type of fee to break my contract or being stuck in a contract because I signed up for a long contract. So it may be a little cheaper to be in a long-term contract, but the reward is that in case of emergency, I have an expense that I can cut without an issue. So that's just a tip that I tend to use. Also, when we think about things like phone plans, family plans can always tend to, cut your expenses just a bit. So I'll tend to get into a family plan or have a shared plan if I know that, we can split this cost and save ourselves a little bit of money. So that's a helpful way, especially if you're in the same house, instead of having separate phone plans. If you use shared plans, you may get a bit of a discount. And then I have a good friend that taught me this one. He would tend to go to places like Walmart and he would get a phone plan, get one of the more, I guess some people would consider them like not your major phone companies. He would use one of those companies. So you're like Alltel Wireless Boost Mobile, things like that. And what he'd find is that they were using the same towers as our major companies. So when we think about Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, those are our big major companies, right? The smaller companies, they were using the exact same tower. So he was getting the same service as me, paying 30, 40, sometimes $100 cheaper than I was. So, and I couldn't believe it. So, there are places having those conversations, you'll find that there's some ways that you can save just by simply not going with the major network, right? So that's something to consider if you're looking for places to cut some of your expenses. All right, let's talk about emergency savings. And I'm loving these tips that's coming into the chat. I hope that everyone's grabbing some tips from the chat, because these are some better tips than I'm providing. I knew most of the experience was right here on the call. So that's why I love these I love the crowdsourcing, because we get some tips, and I'm gonna make sure that I catch some of those tips too, because I'll use some in my life. Let's talk about emergency savings and why it's important and what works best about emergency savings. So we need emergency savings because a lot of times emergency savings is gonna save us even more money in the long run. So for some people, when we have an emergency, we may think that's what my credit card's for, right? Some people will tend to use a credit card in the case of emergencies. But what ends up happening is that big emergency has now become so much more expensive because we have to pay the interest on that credit card, and we have to try to pay it down over time. And it's become more expensive than it would have been if we had the cash saved. So now when we talk about emergency savings, the recommendation for emergency savings is 3 to 6 months of your expenses. And I'm gonna actually tell you where that came from. So most people, they think like 3 to 6 months is just such an arbitrary amount. Where did this come from? That actually started with long-term disability. So when you think about it, your long-term disability tends to kick in the 6th month after you've been disabled. So for most companies, so they started that because they start saying have 6 months of an emergency fund saved, because if 6 months of your expenses are saved, then you have enough to hold yourself until disability kicks in. So that's just a little fun fact for you to know about emergency savings. But when it comes to emergency savings, they say three months if you live in a multiple income household. So if there's more than one income coming in, then, if one person was to have their income reduced or eliminated, then there's at least someone to keep most of those bills going, right? So they say that with 3 months, you're in pretty good shape if there's more than one income coming in. If you have a single income coming into the household, then you want to be at the 6 month mark, so that when if your income is eliminated, you're not worried about your income being eliminated, as well as trying to find more income, right? You can manage and hold and maintain while you're searching for either more employment, or while you're getting your income back up. Now we know 3 to 6 months can be of your expenses can be pretty high, if depending on your expenses, right? If you're spending $2,000 a month on expenses, which I'm only using that for the sake of round numbers. We know most expenses can be way higher than that in some cases. But if you are, let's say it's $2,000, then 6 months, that's $12,000, right? That's no easy amount to just save up in a short period of time. So one of the things to think about is one of the ways that I like to look at my emergency fund is I look at some of my main necessities, some of the things that I know that I might need just for day-to-day transportation, day-to-day living, for comfort, and I'll price out how much that item's going to cost me. And then I'll use that as my target savings first. So let's think, for example, tires, right? If I know I have to drive to and from work, then I may look at the price of tires and say, okay, it will cost me $450 for 4 new tires. In that case, that's my first savings goal, because that may be an emergency that I'm going to need to manage, right? And then another one may be an AC unit or something else. So you look around in your space and in your daily living, and I'd say target 1 or 2 things, price it out, and make that your savings goal first while you're working towards your 3 to 6 months. So that's a good way to start when it comes to an emergency fund. So now let's just talk about savings in general. So when we think about our savers, these are some of the things that are likely happening, and these are some things that are important for you. So when we think about the order, so typically we earn our money first, then we save, then we spend. That's actually a good order of operations, and that's something that the savers usually doing, right? So you're typically saving money immediately when you receive your pay or when your income comes in. You find a way to put some money away. One of the best ways to save is automatic savings. I'm gonna just let you in on a little tip about me. I am not a natural saver. This is not something that I do for fun. It's not something that comes easy to me. So the way that I manage is I make sure that I have my savings set on automatic savings. Now, we talked about those 4 ways of managing your money. So mine, I'm more of a grower of money. That's my space. I love to invest my money first. So but I know how important savings is. So one of the things that I have to do is I set automatic savings. And in order to make sure, because I can also be a little tricky when it comes to being disciplined as well. So I always set my automatic savings for payday. So the day that my money hit my account, that's the day that it's going into savings. So that way I don't have to make the decision myself. It's already made for me. So that's a good tip for anyone who's like me and you're not a natural saver. And you also just, if you had a choice, I'd put it in the stock market before I go and put it in the savings. And I know that that's not always the best thing to do. So I make sure that it automatically comes out on payday, so the decision is already made. So that's just a tip for anyone who wants to try that. And then also 20%, that's the magic number. If you can, at minimum, try to save at least 20% of your income consistently. And then after you save that emergency fund, then now you can start to think about things like moving money into investments and things like that, and growing your money even more beyond what you're already growing, and maybe some long-term savings. So those are some things to think about when it comes to saving in general. And as we mentioned, feel free to add questions to the chat. I'm loving the commentary in the chat. So I know that we're getting some great feedback. So now let's talk long-term savings, because we have to save. We don't, there's always times when our income it may fluctuate, right? So we want to make sure that we have savings to cover us in those cases. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the long-term savings plan things that we want to think about. So first and foremost, retirement calculators. If you're either near retirement or even if you're already in retirement and you just want to do a quick check, just to, every now and then we have to stop and do a check just to make sure that we're on track and make sure that we're where we want to be. Use a retirement calculator. AARP has a great one on our website. If you go to aarp.org/money, you can go and find our retirement calculator there. And the great thing about retirement calculators is that they do a great job of breaking down how much you have, and when you may start to factor in other sources of income, such as Social Security if you're not already taking it, your savings, and when you're going to start to use those things. But then they'll also let you know if you're going to have a shortfall. They'll let you know when. And the great thing, it's like in some cases, even if you may think that you may not be as prepared as you want to be, there's nothing better than actually knowing. Right. And I know that there can be some anxiety around that. There can be can make us nervous at times to see it. But, I was always told that you can't fix what you don't face. So if you see it and you understand it, you know where you are, then you have the opportunity to find the solutions. And the earlier the better, right? So if there will be a shortfall, maybe in some of your later years, then we can start planning and start adjusting now. So take advantage of a retirement calculator. If you've never used one, just as I mentioned, go to aarp.org/money, test out the retirement calculator, put your numbers in, and you'll be able to get an opportunity to see kind of where you are financially. And in some cases, you're going to put the numbers in and just find out I'm in great shape. I am exactly where I want to be. I actually had someone sit when I was doing some financial planning years ago, and I had someone come and sit with me, and they said, I don't think I'm prepared for retirement. we sat down and looked at the numbers. I said, you are very prepared. You are much more prepared than you thought. And it was a great, it's just a great day to have the validation. So retirement calculators take advantage of those. When it comes to retirement, just know that you can still be investing even in retirement. There are some people who will say, I'll only invest up to retirement, but then there's some people who will say, I'll invest through retirement. Because if there are funds that you may not need at the moment, then while they're sitting in savings, you may have an opportunity to make them grow just a little bit. And I'm gonna point that out a little more in a second when we talk about the opportunities for the saver. And then your income, your retirement sources. So where are we pulling money from while we're in retirement? So there's cash savings for as much as we've saved up. Then there's going to be some of our workplace savings. If we have some income producing assets, some of us, we may have things around the house. We may have cars, an additional car sitting. You may be able to rent it out. You may be able to use it for some driving and some spare time. But there's sometimes we have assets that can actually make us money. And we can use that to be just continue to build up our savings in retirement, or just fund our lifestyle in retirement. So the other thing is when we think about, and now there's just so many great opportunities. There's one I mentioned before. If you have a swimming pool, there's sites where you can just rent out your swimming pool now, and you can just, people may use it for a few hours and then they leave, clean up behind themselves, and you've just made a little bit of money, right? So just some of our assets can make us money that are just sitting there for us. And then there are things like annuities and Social Security. These are all things that are going to make us money in retirement. So when we think about long-term savings, all of what we saved up can be in some of these different forms, and they're going to work for us in the future and on our behalf. All right, now this is where I really want us to crowdsource some of those holiday tips, some of the things that we do to save money during the holidays. Are we doing potluck holidays so that we're not buying all the food ourselves, things like that? What are some of the things that we're doing to save money during the holidays? And I'm going to just go through a couple. For some of us, if you really value times like holidays and you like to buy gifts and things, then as I said, we got to know ourselves. We got to know where the things that we want to spend lavishly on, and then we want to know the spaces where we decide to cut back. And I'm not against that, right? If there's one or two things that you just really love to do, but then you'll cut back on everything else, then enjoy yourself where we're in that space. And then in the other spaces, you just decide to cut back because you may not value them as much, and that's perfectly fine. So holiday savings tips. One, if holidays is a big time for you, then a lot of our banks and our credit unions, they have what's called savings clubs, where you may be able to put away $25 or $50 a month into an account, and they'll automatically take it out and just begin to save money so that when the holidays roll around, you have a little amount of money that you saved up that you can then use for your holiday shopping and all the activities that you want to do. So that's one of the great ones, is those savings clubs. Now, I saw people that said that they love to find a deal. For you, do you want to, when it comes to holiday shopping, when I'm buying things online, one of the first things that I do is I'll type in whatever company it is, I'll type in promo code. I'll just look it up on Google and just see if there's a promo code that's going to give me some type of discount for buying this item. And more times than not, I'll find a discount. So I'll get 20% off. I may get 35% off, but I plan to buy the item anyway. So any way that I could save money while doing so, I love to do that. So that's a helpful one. Buying things off season, that's when you can find a lot of discounts and a lot of savings. There are times when I'm very proud of myself for doing this. There are times when I'll buy gift cards. Not gift cards. I'll buy holiday cards off season and get them on discount. And I'll have a little drawer. I just saw them the other day. I looked at my drawer and I still have Father's Day cards for my dad next Father's Day. So, but I happened to find them on sale, and I bought him early, and he's going to get that card next year, and it's ready. It's already ready for him. But that's just a good way for me to save some money by buying things when they go on clearance, especially if they're non-perishable. All non-perishable items, I got a little section for them, and they'll get passed out at times. I got a few Valentine's Day cards too. I'm gonna make sure that those go out one day. But so buying off season, those will help you out. Shopping clearance and closing sales. So you find a store that's going out of business. I was talking to a friend yesterday. One of our supermarkets was going out of business, and they were selling wine 75% off. 75% off of wine. That was just, let's just say that we all have a few extra bottles in the house at this point. But that's the type of thing that we can think about. You catch a good sale, you just get some things and you hold on to it. And of course, regifting, if there's a gift that you got, it usually happens every season, right? We get something that we may not use or that may not suit us. I love to hold those things. I won't even open the box. I just know I'm not going to use that item. I'll hold on to it. And at the next holiday party, oh, that item's getting regifted and it's getting put in a bag and it's going back out the door. So these are just some of the ways that I tend to save. How about you? Tell me about some of the things in the chat. What are you all doing around the holiday season to save money? What should we all be thinking about as we get closer? We're heading into October this Saturday. So we got to get prepared for holiday season. What are we all doing to find those deals? I see some websites coming out. There are some good websites. You can get cash back, all types of things like that, so that we can buy and get more deals during the holidays. So please let us know. One of the thrift stores, that's always a good one. I want to quickly talk about, as we lead into the conversation about the opportunities, I just want to give you a quick visual of some of the things to know. So we see inflation is consistently rising for us, right? But then when we think about savings, just simply saving our money, the rates for saving can be lower than inflation. And then, we have these opportunities where we have these accounts called high yield savings accounts. These are usually online banks. They don't have brick and mortar, so they're able to offer you a little more savings than a place that has to operate and have an actual building. So they can offer a little bit higher interest rates, but they're still not very high. So if you're saving, but you're saving in a bank account, then you may not be keeping up with inflation in most cases. So you could look for a high yield savings account. That's what they call, you'll see HYSA, high yield savings account. That's one way to save a little bit more, but overall, just simply saving in a bank account can sometimes lose you money, especially in a year like this when inflation's so high. And then when we think about things like certificates of deposits, the interest rates on those can tend to still be a little low. So 0.15%, 0.28%, these are fairly low in comparison to what the interest rates are in the market. So with that in mind, we know that the savings rates can be low. So what's our opportunity? For the person who's a natural saver, I'll tell you one of the things that I tend to see from natural savers is that we tend to a natural saver does not like to take too many risks. You've watched your bank account grow. You don't want to see it diminish at all or reduce at all because of the stock market fluctuation. So, there are some opportunities for you to still grow your money, but do it in some safe ways and some ways that aren't as risky. So this list, I listed these in order of risk tolerance. So when we think about things like annuities or certificates of deposit, they're not as high. They're not as risky, but they could make you a little money, right? Bonds, same thing. They're not super risky, but they can make you a little money. But then when we start to get into mutual funds, exchange traded funds, and stocks, there's a little more risk and a little more fluctuation with those. So, for the saver, your opportunity is to grow your money, but you don't have to be super risky. So just keep that in mind. And especially if you're in a position where you have to save your money and you want to save. So the one resource that I'm going to mention today is our Aarp Money Map. It's a great tool. It's one that we can use for savings. They have a savings planner within it. So if you have a savings goal or if you want to be more of a saver, go to Aarp Money Map. So if you go to aarp.org/money, you can look up our Money Map tool, and there you'll be able to get a start on just savings and building up your savings. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeff for our Q&A. I'm sorry, Vince.
And Jacqueline. Right. So thanks so much, Martin. The information you've shared have given me a lot to think about, and I appreciate the helpful tips on saving money. And now we do have a few minutes left for Martin to answer some of your questions that you've posted in the chat. Jacqueline, what questions do you see for Martin in the chat?
Oh, I see really a lot of tips. He said to put in tips, and people really came through with that in terms of a lot of shopping in the summer for deals. especially for the holidays, when things are, and I think he touched on that a little bit too. And joining the savings clubs and joining places like they give cash back, like Rakuten and Ibotta and different places that give money back on the account. And then, of course, the really good one that I tend to use is not putting things on credit card. If you can't pay for it in cash, then maybe you don't need it.
Those are good. What are okay? Yep, I saw one just come in. What are HYSA? Yep. So I'll just reiterate that, and thanks for recapping those, Jackie. And as we mentioned, if there are any other questions, feel free to add them to the chat. So HYSAs, so those are high yield savings accounts. So if you're looking for a way to continue to save money, but you're looking for a little higher interest rate, as we know, when our money's sitting in the bank, we may not find, it's not growing much for us. So they've created a savings accounts, still safe. It's still just a way to save, but you can get a little bit of a higher interest rate on that savings. Typically, those are going to be in with online banks because it's with places that are not brick and mortar. So they're going to, so they're able to allow you to get a little bit more interest because their expenses tend to be a little bit lower.
Okay. Kathy wanted to know, what are annuities?
Great question, Kathy. So with annuities, that's going to be a product that you can use to, it's a fairly safe way to save money, but then also still grow your money. So kind of think like a certificate of deposit, if you know what that is, right? So with annuities, you'll provide a sum of money, and then that sum of money is being dispersed to you in either like monthly or on some periodic basis, and you can tend to get a little bit more interest for providing them with that set amount of money. So, and you're going to usually get those with a bank. With a bank, they're going to provide that for you. So imagine you have provided them with 100,000 in cash. You're going to have they're going to tell you what percent it's going to grow for you, and you'll also know how much they're going to disperse to you monthly. So it's like them managing your money, and by you providing them the money to manage, they can also provide you with a percentage for some percentage of growth.
We have a question where someone said wants to know about charities. There are charities that pay you money. You donate to them and then you get money back. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Actually, I'm not. I need to know more about that too. So they mentioned that there's charities that, I'm trying to read the question. I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that. And if someone in the chat knows, if someone on the call knows, feel free to mention it because I'm not 100% sure.
I think they're asking probably about charitable remainder trusts.
Oh.
Okay.
Which is a little complicated. It's
okay. I was gonna say, Vince, if you know, feel free to talk about that.
I know a little bit about it, not much, but it's basically where you can designate a portion of your savings to a charity and say that that's what you're going to give to the charity, and then that trust essentially will pay you a certain amount per year until you pass away, and then the remainder goes to the charity. So it's a way of saving taxes, really.
Got it.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think one tip that someone had was always making sure that your account is not easily accessed, because it's easy to dip into it. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Martin?
Oh, sure. Happy to do so. So I'll just give a little bit of a strategy that I actually use when it comes to that. When it comes to savings, one of the things that I'll use accounts that won't allow me to transfer money to myself without like a 1 to 3 business day time period. So for someone, and I'll tell you why, as I mentioned, you got to know yourself. I can be a little impulsive at times, right? So if I see something that I want and I want to transfer money to myself, if it's going to take 3 business days, I can talk myself down. So I'll go to make the transfer and then I see, oh, you know what, that's going to take too long. I don't really need that item. So now I can talk myself out of it. So usually there are banks there are different banks and they'll offer some accounts that'll take longer for you to actually withdraw your money. And those are good places to save, because if you have that impulse in you, then you can talk yourself out of it. So if you're looking for that, ask your bank for an account that's going to take a longer time to transfer the money out. So you can find something that'll take you maybe 3 days to make the transfer, and that'll help you. So yes, making your money less accessible will help you save better.
And Jeff said something about some recent CD rates are at 3%.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, so the CD rates are going up. Thanks for mentioning that, Jeff. So yeah, you'll see some rates are starting to go up. So certificates of deposits, they can be a better tool now than they were a few years ago. Now that the rates are up, so those rates do fluctuate from time to time. And right now the rates are a little higher. So if you have a significant amount of cash, or you just have any lump sum of cash that may be sitting in a bank account and it's not drawing much interest, you may want to consider putting it in a CD so that you can grow that money a little bit.
Okay. And another tip that someone mentioned, and you touched on this, was shared senior living accommodations and food and utilities, where to have some savings.
Yes. Yeah. It's always helpful at any shared living. Housing is typically our largest expense for most people. Housing is your largest expense. If you can find a way to lower housing expenses, you found a significant place to save money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and then of course, a lot of us have grandkids, so they're, buying things for your grandkids or your family members for the holidays now.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah.
It was a good suggestion. Mm-hmm.
Starting shopping. I see someone mentioned about online banks, or asking what are some of the online banks. So some of so one of the ones that I use for that will take a longer time for me to transfer my money is like One United Bank. They're actually I believe they're in California actually. But One United Bank, that they tend to take 3 days to transfer my money to me. So I just save the money. That's a great place for saving. But they also and then if you're looking for like high yield savings accounts that are online, now some names are escaping me, but if you were to type in HYSA or high yield savings accounts, they're going to be mostly online banks, and they're going to be you'll see their bank rates for savings online as well, and you can kind of do some comparisons and find one that's going to work for you.
And Ellen said something about referral fees called affiliation marketing. Do you know anything? Can you speak on that?
A little. I haven't used it much, but I've seen where it's, I believe when you're spending, I believe it's places where when you're buying items, they can like give you like cash back and things like that for using their services, or using their businesses services, or buying through their service. So you'll receive money back throughout the year, and you'll kind of just you'll be paid for using it. And with affiliate marketing, you may be promoting that business, so you're asking other people to you're letting other people know about that business. As they purchase through that business, then you get paid from that business as well. So you're allowing your friends and your network to purchase from a different place. From one specific place, and you'll get paid for it.
All right, so we are just about out of time. So I want to say thank you to Martin for your excellent presentation today. That was amazing. And we hope that you all feel encouraged and inspired to utilize these tips and discover the money saver in you. So let us know how much you enjoyed today's program by completing the survey. There's going to be a link in the chat that you can click on that will help you get to that survey. There it is. Please give us your feedback. And then I'm glad you could join us today, and we invite you to our monthly online event, Tea and Coffee Tuesday. And our next Tea and Coffee Tuesday will be October 11th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Join us for part 2 of What's Recyclable with Mark Bowers, solid waste management expert. Mark returns to help us demystify what items are recyclable, what we can do to reduce our waste, and how to manage organic compostable materials. And please come back for part 4 of Piggy Bank Essentials, the Money Spender and Giver. That's Thursday, November 17th at 9 a.m. Pacific, and that will be Martin Booker coming back to help us again. And again, a big thank you to our guest, Martin Booker, our moderator, Jacqueline Cole, our production crew, Joyce Howard, our tech specialist, Connie Moore, the AARP staff that's on the call, and you for joining us. Again, I'm Vince King, your AARP volunteer.